Welcome to another episode of Discovering the Book of Mormon Through Science and Exploration. And today, a good measure of speculation. We'll be discussing the mysteries that lie in the vast territory of the Amazon River Basin. Its colossal size could still hide many evidences of the Book of Mormon. The Amazon basin covers approximately 2.7 million square miles, 10 times the size of Texas, or the equivalent of 32 Utahs. It contains 60% of the world's rainforest. Hidden in its jungles are countless undiscovered ruins and artifacts just waiting to be discovered. For these reasons, in my latest book, Christ's Mission in Ancient South America, I included the disclaimer stating that my model for the Book of Mormon lands in South America is tentative. The first Spaniard to see the Amazon River was Francisco de Orellana in 1541 through 1542. He was second in command to Consuelo Pizarro. The Spanish were looking for the land of cinnamon, east of Quito, Ecuador, in the east side of the Andes Mountains. After splitting with Pizarro's struggling party, he found it difficult returning upstream, so he continued downstream with a small party. Eventually, he reached the mouth of the Amazon River in August of 1542. Since he encountered indigenous women-led warriors, he named the river the Amazon. While navigating down the river, his party reported large, populous, and well-organized native communities. Orellana claimed that for days at a time, his expedition passed villages and towns that seemed to stretch along the river banks without interruption. He noted that the towns had centralized leadership, agriculture, and defensive structures, suggesting a complex social organization. Orellana's claims were written off as mere myths, despite knowing that at least 80% of the indigenous people in South America were killed off by smallpox and other European diseases at the time of the conquest. Westerners continue to believe that the Amazon basin was only sparsely populated at any point in time. Recent archaeological and ecological studies, such as discoveries of Tierra Preta, that is, fertile dark earth, and geoglyphs, support the idea that the Amazon once supported large and sophisticated civilizations. These findings lend credibility to Orellana's controversial claims, which were long dismissed as exaggerations. Further proof came from recent LIDAR surveys, which confirmed that a civilization larger than the Mayans once existed in the Ecuadorian Amazon. Research in Brazil, Bolivia, and Peru have discovered in the Amazon basin large settlements, extensive road systems, canals, raised agricultural fields, and geoglyphs. In 2024, the Smithsonian Institute reported these findings from just one small LIDAR exploration and survey in the Amazon basin in eastern Ecuador. Laser imaging has revealed an extensive network of settlements and roads that challenge historical understanding of the area. Using laser scanning technology, have found traces of 2,500-year-old cities in the Amazon rainforest, complete with a complex network of farmland and roads. The discovery is the oldest and largest of its kind in the region. Located in Ecuador's Upano Valley, the dense system of pre-Columbian structures lies in the eastern foothills of the Andes Mountains, according to a study published Thursday in the journal Science. Covering roughly 300 square kilometers, more than 100 square miles, images from the LIDAR survey reveal a landscape full of organized human activity. These include more than 6,000 rectangular earthen platforms, as well as agricultural terraces and drainage systems. The road network is very sophisticated, he tells BBC News Georgina Ranard. It extends over a vast distance. Everything is connected. The sprawling complex was likely occupied by the people of the Kilimope and Upao cultures from about 500 BCE until 300 to 60 CE, current period. Previously, scientists assumed that ancient South Americans lived nomadically or in tiny settlements in the Amazon, writes BBC News, but researchers estimate the newly discovered cities housed a population in the 10,000s, if not 100,000s. It is far too early to speculate on the role that the indigenous people of the Amazon had on the Book of Mormon history. However, recent discoveries seem to support the idea that these claims were valid and there might have been some affiliation with Book of Mormon people. Here are just a few examples. In 1644, Antonio de Montesinos, also known as Aharon Levi, was a 17th century Portuguese traveler and converso Jew who claimed to have discovered descendants of the 10 lost tribes in the jungles that are now Ecuador and Peru. He arrived in Amsterdam after a decade in South America. He hurried to meet with Rabbi Manasseh ben Israel and other Jewish leaders to recount his extraordinary tale. While prospecting in the Ecuadorian region of New Guinea, he traveled with several Indian guides on their way to Papina in Peru. It was here that he came across a reference to the holy people. He convinced his guides to take him to meet these people. The Indians were fair-skinned, spoke Hebrew, and recited the Shema prayer, and were the descendants of the 10 lost tribes. The Indians wanted to be thoroughly instructed in the principles of their faith. Montesinos returned to Europe as their emissary. He swore on his deathbed in Brazil in 1647 that this story was true. In 2008, the London Daily reported that a lost city had been discovered deep in the Amazon rainforest in eastern Ecuador, and that the city was linked to the legendary white-skinned tribe. The ancient city was associated with the white-skinned people they called the Cloud People of Ecuador. A lost city discovered deep in the Amazon rainforest could unlock the secrets of a legendary tribe. Little is known about the Cloud People of Peru, an ancient white-skinned civilization wiped out by disease and war in the 16th century. But now archaeologists have uncovered a fortified citadel in a remote mountainous area of Peru known for its isolated natural beauty. It is thought this settlement might finally help historians unlock the secrets of the white warriors of the clouds. Features would intrigue historians, as there is no known European ancestry in the region, where most inhabitants are darker skinned. The citadel is tucked away in one of the most far-flung areas of the Amazon. The early Spanish conqueror Pedro Chiza de Leon wrote of the Chacapoya people, "They are the whitest and most handsome of all the people that I have seen, and their wives are so beautiful, and because of their gentleness, many of them deserve to be Inca wives and also to be taken to the Sun Temple." In 1492, Francisco de Orellana, while sailing up the Napa River, a tributary of the Amazon, heard legend of a white-skinned warriors with blue eyes and light beards. Orellana and his men came upon the excellent land and dominion of the Amazons, and were beset upon by very tall and white fighting women. These women of fair complexion had their long hair twisted over their heads. In his book, lost cities, white tribes. Graham Holton describes the prevailing theory as to why the Chiquipoyas settled on the eastern slopes of the Andes Mountains in the Amazon basin. Their migration might reflect the Nephites' need to find a safe haven from the wars of their people and the Lamanites. The Antisuyo, one of the four quarters of the Inca Empire, is a vast jungle region along the eastern slopes of the Andes. Carbon-14 dating has shown that the cities of the Antisuyo reached their zenith around AD 900 to 1000. Sometime between 100 BC and AD 600, there was a total replacement of population from the valley bottoms to building cities on the high ridges at elevations of up to 4,000 meters. Explorer Jean Savoy has discovered 42 lost cities in Antisuyo. Antisuyo is the quarter of the Inca Empire that was in the eastern slopes of the Andes Mountains. Savoy has lectured at BYU. Holt discusses Savoy's claim of having discovered a tribe of white-skinned people in that area. Quote, Savoy maintains that the Chachapoyans were descendants of a light-skinned people. During the 1965 expedition, Savoy tells how while walking on a trail in the forest beyond the village of Mendoza, quote, we were approached by 5 tall men. They stood much taller than the average native in the region. I noticed that they were blond and blue-eyed, with long, thin faces and aquiline noses. They were decidedly white-skinned. As we visited the villages in the region, I began to notice a large number of light-skinned, blue-eyed people. While Holton may question the claims of Savoy, they are still the writings of the early Spanish who reported that the Chachapoyas and the Inca nobles were taller and had fair skin tones than the Spanish. Antipas is the name of a mountain or hill on the summit of which the Lamanite armies on one occasion had gathered themselves to battle. Antipas is a genuine Quechua word, the native language of the Peruvians. Holton writes, quote, on the mountain slopes of the Cordillera in the upper Andes Basin, there is, according to Dr. Benton, a tribe of Indians of the Livaro linguistic stock known as the Antipas. They are described as, quote, rather tall, of light color, with thin lips, aquiline noses, straight eyes, pronetic jaws, black hair, or with reddish tint. Carly M. Springer writes of a small tribe living in the vast territory of the Amazon basin. If establishing the church in cities seems almost easy, the challenge is preaching the gospel to those who live far away in the sparsely populated outer regions of Paraguay. Out in the grasslands and jungles, the people live in scattered communities, and some tribes have their own separate languages. However, at least one of these remote tribes has retained native oral traditions tracing back to Book of Mormon events, preparing its people for the gospel. In 1980, the entire Naveski native tribe of 200 people converted to the gospel when missionaries told them the story of the Savior's visiting the Americas. The leader of the tribe recognized the story as one passed down from their ancestors, and he knew he was hearing restored truths. Today, this tribe lives in a community of around 40 LDS families and has renamed their settlement Abundancia, Spanish for bountiful. Countless LDS missionaries from the Yukon to Chile have heard oral traditions of the native people, how a white-skinned God visited them, healed their people, taught them how to live and to be righteous. This phenomenon is particularly true in South America. For example, the indigenous people of the Amazon worship Sumi, the god of agriculture and discipline. Sumi had a white beard and provided laws and rules for the people. In 1872, Abbés da Costa claimed that while moving stones on his property, his slaves found a broken stone with inscriptions on it. Known as the Parebe inscriptions, it was found at Poço Alto, Brazil, near the mouth of the Amazon River. A copy of the inscriptions was sent to the president of the Historical and Geographical Institute of Brazil, who stated that the inscriptions were in the Phoenician language, describing a voyage of Phoenicians around 531 BC. Ladislau Neto, director of the National Museum of Brazil, initially believed the inscriptions were Phoenician, but later concluded that they must have been fake because he believed the inscriptions had inconsistencies. However, just as in the case of the archaeologists having to reverse their position on the conquistadors Ollana's claims of large cities on the banks of the Amazon River, leading scholars such as Cyrus G. Gordon taught that the Parebe stone inscriptions are authentic. Gordon was a towering figure in the field of ancient Near Eastern cultures, languages, and biblical history. He earned a PhD from the University of Pennsylvania. He mastered several ancient languages. He was the head of the Department of Mediterranean Studies at Brandeis University. Gordon further showed that the Phoenicians had the navigation skills to achieve transoceanic crossings to Brazil in the 6th century BC. German scholar Linhard Bielichat wrote in 1969 that the inscriptions were authentic and dated to the 6th century BC. From his translation, we read, "We are children of Sidon. We are a nation of traders. Our ship is beached on this far-off mountainous coast. We have sailed all around this land, both hot and far." What stands out from the translation is the word Sidon, bringing to mind the river Sidon in the Book of Mormon. From the brief description of the Phoenicians' voyage, before they became beached, we learned that they visited a mountainous land and traveled far and in a hot land. The Phoenicians were beached somewhere near the 200-mile wide mouth of the Amazon River. Had they traveled up the Amazon until they reached the mountainous slopes of the eastern Andes, certainly their river voyage would have been hot and long. Coca leaves grow on the eastern slopes of the Andes Mountains at an elevation from 1,500 to 6,000 feet. Had the beached Phoenician traders freed their beached vessel and returned to Sidon with a new, highly addictive product to trade, that is, cocaine? Did they introduce the first global exchange of one of their favorite drugs for a new and even more powerful narcotic? The Phoenicians were excellent navigators and could easily find their way back to the Amazon River basin. Indeed, from Africa to the mouth of the Amazon River is less than 2,000 miles. But how do we know that the Phoenicians were some of the world's first drug traffickers? The Egyptians were not known for sailing the Mediterranean Sea. They depended on their allies, the Phoenicians, to import and export by sea their trade goods. One of the goods they exported aboard Phoenician ships was marijuana, or cannabis. Two of the items they imported from the Amazon were tobacco and cocaine. THC comes from the plant cannabis, that is marijuana or hemp. The chemical compound has been found in mummies in ancient Peru. Cannabis is not native to South America. It originated in Southeast Asia. By Lehi's era, it was used by the Greeks and the Romans. It was not until 1542 that the Spanish imported cannabis to Chile as a raw material for making fiber. How did TCH from cannabis of Asian origin get into the ancient Peruvian mummies unless there was some form of contact with the Mediterranean? The ancient drug trade seems to have also flourished in the opposite direction. Swanson notes, in 1992, physical scientists in Germany used sophisticated laboratory instrumentation to test 9 other Egyptian mummies. They found chemical residue of tobacco coca, another South American plant, the source of cocaine, and the Asian native hashish in the hair, soft tissues, skin, and the bones of 8 of the mummies. These traces included cocaine, a chemical whose presence means that the tobacco had been consumed and metabolized while the deceased person was alive. The 9th mummy contained coca and hashish residue but not tobacco. Dates of the corpus, according to historical records from Egypt, range from 1070 BC to AD 395, indicating that these drugs were continuously available to some Egyptians for no less than 1450 years. Investigators have since found evidence of the drugs in additional mummies in Egypt. While the Mulekites left Jerusalem at generally the same time as Lehi's party, their experience in reaching the Promised Land was quite different from that of Lehi's. For example, Nephi and his helpers built a ship that was praised as being of good workmanship, and the voyage was a central theme of the Nephite lore. However, there is no mention in the Book of Mormon of the Mulekites building a vessel or learning how to sail a ship. Likewise, to construct a ship, Nephi learned crafts including smelting tools, working timbers, making cordage, and crafting sails. It would seem unlikely that Mulek, a royal prince of Judah, would have possessed any of these manual skills, nor would it have been appropriate for a prince to have indulged in physical labor such as maintaining the sails. Certainly, when he fled the fall of Jerusalem, Mulek would have taken sufficient resources from the royal treasury to hire a crew and a ship to take him to a safe haven. Hugh Nibley suggested that the Mulekites probably reached the New World by hiring the services of Phoenician mariners. I support this idea. Nibley pointed to the Phoenician names in the Book of Mormon, including the river Sidon, that appears to have been the name of the Phoenician harbor of Sidon. Nibley notes that at the time of the Mulekites, the Phoenicians were colonizing far-off lands and did so by sailing great distances from their home ports of Tyre and Sidon. Having Prince Mulek and his entourage board Phoenician trading ships bound for the Amazon River basin seems reasonable. Mulek's father, King Zedekiah, got into trouble with King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon because Zedekiah was forming secret alliances with the Egyptians. To secure these alliances, one would expect the Egyptians to have guaranteed Zedekiah that if anything went wrong, they would protect Zedekiah and his family. However, when Nebuchadnezzar struck, it was too late for the king. Yet his son Mulek could have fled to Egypt, where he was placed on a Phoenician drug trading ship bound for the Amazon basin. Mulek might even have been promised that once things in Canaan settled down, that he would be returned to his homeland, where he would regain the throne. That never happened. At this point, all we can do is speculate about the role the people of the Amazon River Basin played in the history of the Book of Mormon. However, the clues discussed above lead me to believe that the indigenous people of the Amazon played a significant role. It is estimated that only 4 to 9% of the archaeological sites in the Amazon River Basin have been discovered to date. That could mean that 91 to 96% of possible Book of Mormon era sites in the Amazon are still hidden beneath the forest canopy of the world's largest rainforest. Learn more about the Book of Mormon by subscribing to this channel. You can also visit our website, christinperu.com, where you can learn about our annual Book of Mormon tours to Peru, where I will be your guide. Thank you.